talk a bit about yourself. Yeah, talk, Brian.
Well, I got the opportunity to speak at the first version of this, and I just want to say to Tom, uh, I love those printers. I think you may have sold me one back then. You are a heck of a salesperson. That was great stuff. Um, I'm not kidding. I remember those.
Yeah.
So for those of you that didn't join us last time, I'm Brian DeLemos. I have changed roles since we last spoke. When we last spoke, I was running global accounts and sales effectiveness for Palo Alto Networks. I'm now the global vice president of sales for Unit 42, which is our incident response and cyber defense organization inside of Palo Alto Networks. So when you read about pipeline breaches and ransomware, we're the ones who get called and try and remediate that, but we're also trying to sell folks services that are proactive and help their security posture prior to those bad things happening to them. And I've been in security sales since 2003. Before that, I was in a variety of different sales roles and engineering roles and product development roles. And I've really been in sales my entire life, though. If I think back to the things I did as a kid, little businesses I ran, what the jobs and businesses I was part of through high school and college, I love helping people achieve what they want. And those are customers, those are people who work for me as well. Um, I feel that sales is an incredibly honorable profession because you're
I
held
love it.
accountable every day, right? Your customers hold you accountable, you hold yourself accountable. And there's so few things in life that are really truly black and white. There's so few things in life that you actually get to cross through the finish line and that marathon tape. Sales is one of those things. It's demonstrable, it's definable. So I really thrive on it. We can talk about a variety of things today with Tom and Venki. So thank you everyone for your time and your attention.
Thanks, Brian. I think you had a beautiful word called honorable. Somebody said sales is divine. You know, so thank you so much, Tom and Brian, for that brief background of yourself. Very, very commendable. So let me also take the opportunity to talk about myself, right? Maybe a minute. I think a lot of people know me, but then my name is Venki Kumaran. For those of you who don't know me, I'm currently the president of Astrom Technologies, one of the hottest 5G startups and space startups in the world. And also the co-chair of the IoTForum, and I'm doing my bit from that. I'm wearing the IoTForum hat today to kind of pick the brains of Tom and Brian, who are also very, very celebrated and accomplished sales leaders today. So, all right, so let me start with the first question, Tom, right, and Brian. So,
Okay.
you know, um, even before we kind of talk sales, right, or you're going to make the first call, right, we're going to make the first call to the customer. We're kind of making that first call. We identified the account that we need to open. We're making the first call. So what are the top three things you need to prepare yourselves for the first call? What have you been doing? Because
Nice.
we want to know how you guys have been so successful in your career. We want to take a little bit of that and pass it on to our budding entrepreneurs and sales enthusiasts and people who want to make a career in sales, right? So,
Yes.
Tom, go ahead first.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. Oftentimes in as we're diving into the sales world, and if particularly if you're new to it, one of the things that you're going to experience is that sometimes people don't call you back, or it's hard to get a hold of folks. And what can happen is that all of a sudden you get a call back, right? And you're really excited, and you just want to jump into things. But there's really three things that I like to think about before you really engage with a customer. And first of all, it's understanding the first thing that you absolutely need to figure out is who are you talking to at the customers right now? Is this a decision maker? Is it somebody on the staff? Is it an influencer? Is it somebody who just wants to use the product? So make sure you understand fully who it is you're talking about. One, so that you can set your expectations about what you might accomplish on the call, but also what's important for you to tell them, right? What you might be talking to a champion about versus a decision maker might be different things. So first of all, number one thing, know who you're meeting with and what the role is in the company. The next thing that I think that is really important that we often forget is make sure you set goals and objectives for the meeting. And this is really, really important because you may be excited about getting in and you want to tell them everything about your great product and service and how it's going to change your life and how all this is going to work out. And it's important to tell the customer and yourself, what is it that you want to accomplish on the call?
Mm-hmm.
And that leads to the third thing, which I think is vitally important, is to make sure you set an agenda for the call. I've been involved in situations where I've been excited to talk to a customer and I want to go tell them everything that that we have about the product. And I dive into the conversation and without an agenda. And what happens is that customers come to this meeting with their own sets of expectations as well. So you may launch into some aspect of what you want to talk about your product, and they're sitting there thinking, well, no, I want to learn about your company, not about your product right now. So it's a good idea, as you're preparing for that first meeting, set the agenda. This is what I'm going to talk to you about. And it's okay it can be very, very simple, but at least the customer knows what you're going to tell them. They're going to have a set of expectations, and you're going to be able to prepare exactly what you need for that first meeting. So the top three things, if I just summarize them for you: know who you're going to meet with, set the goals, and make sure you have an agenda, and tell the customer what it is you're going to tell them during that meeting.
Thanks, Tom. Objective of why you're making the call is so very good and important before you kind of make that call. Thank you very much. Brian, what's been your experience? What do you kind of follow?
Well, the first thing I'd say is Tom just gave you 20 plus decades of advice there. I would follow that advice. Okay. So that's hard. It sounds, like the fundamentals, but the reason he's telling you this is because you'd be amazed how many people don't do what Tom just said.
Correct.
So let me say what I heard Tom say is preparation. So you have to prepare for your meetings. Don't wing it. Okay. Mm-hmm. Whatever preparation means for you, and let me run through some things that I think of when I think of preparation. Many people do not prepare. They don't learn about the company they're going to. Mm-hmm. Read about the company. Mm-hmm. Find out what they do. Think about what would be important to them in relation to what you could bring to help make them successful. Right? If it's a publicly traded company, read their publicly traded documents. We call those, we have different names for those in the US. So try and understand the company before you get there. Absolutely. That way you can be prepared with good questions that are open-ended, that you can have a discussion with them, which leads me into the second piece. So everything Tom said, preparation. Then Tom also talked about mindset, right? When I'm selling, I like to be in the mindset that I'm having a conversation. I don't show up with slides. I don't show up with a demo. I show up with all of that stuff in my bag, and I sit down and I evaluate the situation as it is in the moment, right? And I say to customers, or I say to potential folks, how would you like this meeting to go? Would you like to see a demo? Would you like to see slides? Would you just like to have a conversation? I like having conversations. I try not to even bring up product for a long time. I try and ask a lot of open-ended conversations. What's important to you? What are you planning for? Let's say it was security, right? Because that's my area of specialty. I would ask that kind of question, like, talk about your security priorities for this year. Have you thought about what your security priorities over the next 3 years? Can you share that information with me? I'm just collecting, I'm learning, and I'm trying to stay comfortable because I know there's a lot of folks here who are founders of companies and CEOs of companies. I know there's also folks here who are salespeople. We're all in sales, and we want to develop relationships with our customers. And I think one of the best ways to develop relationships is, as Tom said, be prepared, right? Have the right mindset, and also build that trust. If you're prepared, if you're in the moment, if you're reading the room, And being prepared also means that you're extremely confident that if they ask you a question about what you sell, if they ask you a question about your company, if they ask you a question about your numbers, you can handle that question, or you say, that's a great question. I don't have the answer to it right now. I will get it for you and get back to you. You develop that trusting relationship. Because the third thing you want to do, and Tom also hit on this a bit, is make sure you know what you want the outcome of this meeting to be, which, as we all know in corporate America, is another meeting, right?
Yeah.
The outcome is you've learned
Yeah.
a lot from this discussion, and now
Yeah.
in the second conversation,
Yeah.
you're probably going to bring it more to a point where you can say, I've taken what we've learned. Here's what I'm thinking on how we can help you. Here's the values we bring. Here's what I understand your organization to look like now. Here's what I sell can help you look like after. Here's the benefits I can bring. Here's what the positive business outcomes are that we can bring to you, right? And then you start to have some call to action discussions after that. So that's how I look at those first calls.
Okay, great. And not to forget, a time, a cadence in terms of when is the next meeting after I get back to you with all that you wanted me to get back on, right? So to keep that continuation, right? So before, so now you kind of made the call, you kind of had the discussion, and you also did all the great things. You followed the process perfectly. So you come back. So there's this big blue tip that you need to make minutes of the meeting and send it back to the customer. How important is that? And when do you think the account manager or a sales leader need to do that? Should he drive it, or should he wait for the minutes of the meeting to come from the customer?
Tom,
Go ahead, Brent.
My opinion on this is you will never get it from the customer unless they're unhappy about something. Then you'll hear what you talked about and what they want. So if you've sold them something and it's not going well, you'll get minutes meetings, promise.
Okay.
But if you're trying to sell them something, I would suggest looking at your notes, right? Because we all take notes while we're in our meetings, right? We write down important points so that we have things to follow up on. We're looking at people in the face, but we're taking our notes. I do send emails afterwards and say things like, really appreciate your time and the conversation as we work to set up our meeting on June 3rd. Here's the 3 or the 2 or the 4, whatever it is, but I try and keep it pretty short. Here's the 3 points, takeaways for the meeting that I'm working on the follow-ups for. Here's what you asked for, right? So I keep it short. I have a general rule that it shouldn't really be more than one scroll on the phone. Try not to even scroll it on the phone once. If you can capture it in that about that much space, you know, keep it short, to the point. You put a little note at the end saying, I have more details here if you'd like to discuss these points further, that sort of thing. So my point is, yes, keep it short, and you have to do it.
Great.
Exactly. That follow-up email, I think, is absolutely critical, because again, you're trying to keep the process moving. As you know, the goal of the meeting is to get another meeting. And one of the things that I think is also very helpful, and Brian hit it on the head, keep it short. One of the things that I like to do as well that I think is really effective, particularly if you're meeting with several people in a group, where the discussion might be going back and forth and you talk about things you need to do, and it's not necessarily clear who's going to follow up on that action item. So if there's a specific action item, it's a good idea, particularly on the customer side, if they have an action item like to send you some documentation or answer some question, assign a name. Oh, Venky's going to do that. You know, he's going to follow. So that person knows that, hey, I'm on the hook to do this and I got to get it done. And then if you need to follow up, you know who to follow up with. and it makes things going. So keep it short. Don't be afraid to put names on there in terms of action items. Who owns that action item, and make sure you send that follow-up email. I think it's really important.
Absolutely. So I think to sum it up, as short as it can be, mutually inclusive and collectively exhaustive. They call it MICE. Okay. Right. So before I can kind of get to your experiences of selling, I think it's good to kind of give a little bit of a snapshot of what is the sales process, right? Do we require that at all? And why do I need to know about it? Right? So, Tom, you want to kind of take that? What exactly is the sales process? I mean, is there a process at all?
Sure. Yeah, there absolutely is. Sales is definitely a journey. Like as Brian had mentioned, the goal of a meeting is to get another meeting. And if you think about that in a process perspective, it is absolutely true. Think about if you just want to build a house, for example, right? You can't throw the roof on before the walls are up. You can't put the walls up before the foundation is laid. And the sales process is the same thing. You've got to have the meetings that lead to other meetings, that lead to demos, that lead to evaluations, that lead to competitive bake-offs, that lead to closing of sales. All those steps have to happen in the process. And there are several, and maybe Brian can touch on this as well, there are several sort of names for the sales process, whether it's Challenger or Spin, or there's lots of different names that help you go through the process. And the important thing for those processes, they're all slightly different, is to understand which one applies best to you. And if it's going to be useful, you can use it. But basically the process will outline all the steps that need to be happen. And it does you a big favor, because to go to the next step in the process, you might need some tools or some thing to make that next step happen. So for example, if step 4 in the process is a customer proof of concept, right? They want to take a look at it. You've gotten to that point, but are you ready for the proof of concept? Not only technically, but administratively. Do you want them to sign a document? Should you have something in writing about what's going to happen as a result of the proof of concept? And when you go into that step in the process, knowing the resources you're going to need internally is going to make everything go a lot smoother and faster for you.
Mm-hmm.
So the sales process is absolutely important. It's absolutely important for your product to understand what that looks like, to map it out, how long you think that's going to take, and the resources that you're going to need for each step in the process to move it to the next phase.
Okay, great. So, early in our days, we were all put to training programs, and there was this Xerox way of selling called SPANCO, right? Which is suspect, prospect, and approach, how to approach, and kind of move on in the cycle, and finally you close and ask for the order, right? So is there something different now? Is something changed in sales or anything of that kind? Is there any quick fix to this whole thing, Brian?
Well, so you asked several questions there, Venki. Let me say at the outset, in my experience, there's no quick fix to sales. Sales is a process, as Tom said, and the reason why we have a sales process is so that we don't get ahead of ourselves. What you're trying to constantly do in sales is demystify what's actually occurring in your day-to-day life.
Okay.
Right? Because just because a customer has taken a meeting with you, it doesn't mean they're going to buy anything. It actually doesn't even mean that they're interested in anything you have to say.
Mm-hmm.
And just because a customer might be mean to you and not take your phone calls doesn't mean they're not going to buy anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right? So, and I mentioned this on the first one, on the first version of this. I'm going to bring it up here again because it's how I think about everything we do in sales. And as I told my new team yesterday morning, as they were getting to know me, there's 5 things that every deal that closes has an affirmative answer to.
Mm-hmm.
In high tech sales anyway, but I think that this is applicable beyond high tech sales.
Yes.
Every sale must have a compelling event. So when you go to a customer and you have that first meeting and you've done the preparation that Tom and I and Venki are talking about, etc., you have to be asking yourself, what is the compelling event at this organization for them to want to, this is the important part, separate themselves with money in order to move forward. Plenty of people will take meetings with you to learn about your technology. Plenty of people will take meetings with you to get a free lunch. Plenty of people will take meetings with you to see if they should go and get budget to work on something. That last kind is a good meeting, but in general, what is I mean, 100% of the time, not in general. Every deal that closes has to have a compelling event to do what it is you need them to do. The second thing is you have to have a champion, at least one, who's there selling for you when you're not in the room. Okay, this is somebody who's willing to take on the political challenges, the operational challenges, who's willing to put their credibility on the line when you're not there. So you have to have a champion, at least one champion, and you have to be able to identify the difference between a champion and a coach. That's a whole different conversation.
Absolutely.
The third thing you need to have is the technical win. The customer has to have told you in writing or in person, we're choosing your technology, whether your technology is a mattress, a car, a rocket ship, or whatever. You have to have chosen your technology over the other stuff they've looked at. The fourth thing is you have to understand what the reverse timeline is for them to go live with your thing you're selling. So if they want to go live on August 1st, you need to understand what are the steps that need to happen in backwards order between today and then in order for them to go live. And the fifth thing, a lot of people do those four things. Here's the fifth thing that a lot of people don't do. You need to understand what the paperwork process, whether it's digitized now, but what's the paperwork process for that company to issue payment? What's the time frame? Who signs it? How many signatories are there? How long does that take? What kind of systems does it go with? Who owns that process? You need to understand what the paperwork process is. There's two types of sales cultures: participatory and performance-based.
Beautiful.
We can talk about that, but one of the differences between participatory and performance is performance-based salespeople understand the paperwork process. They understand how to separate companies with money. So that's why we need a sales process, because otherwise we're just having meetings and we don't necessarily understand where we're going.
I thought sales was easy, Brian and Tom. So
we're just on the golf course, like most of the time we're on the golf course.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's because every pro makes it look easy. That's
exactly. Right. Okay. So we are, like you use the word demystify, everything, right? Because you're the ambassador for the company, right? So Brian really spoke about the process, and I love the 5 points, especially the last one, because that's when there's so much delay between the time they say, I want to get the order, but it takes like 6 months before you get the order and the money in the bank, right? So I like the fifth one, right? So now that you have been selling, all of you have been selling for like decades, right? Can you kind of share some experiences of maybe a few strategic mistakes both of you have made in sales calls, okay? And now that you're veterans, right, in sales, what would you have done differently today? Yeah.
I'm dying to hear this from
Tom. Go ahead.
I've got one burned in my head for the last 15 years that I think about every day, and
please share it.
The strategic mistake is do not sell it twice.
Beautiful. Very well said. Please explain.
Once the customer says yes, it's time to move on to the next phase.
Fantastic.
Let me give you an example. We were this was back in the early IoT days, and we were working on a big deal to sell this IoT set of products, and it was going really, really well. And it was early in the day, so we were working with beta product and code that necessarily wasn't 100% QA'd, but we had been through the sales process, and we had lined everything up where we're at a point where we needed the demo and we were going to ask for the order. And so we set up this demo, and the meeting went well. We got 80% through the demo, and the customer said, you know what, this is great. We want to do this. We were so excited that, at that point, the sale was closed. The customer said, we're going to take it. But the team was so excited because we had gotten this far that we continued to press on with the demo and selling more features of the product, which we didn't have to do. And lo and behold, what happens? The demo blows up. And the customer says, oh, this doesn't really work. And so we basically took a sale that we had in the bank and unwound it because we continue to sell, and what I call selling it twice. So big strategic mistake. If the customer says yes, then it's time to move on to the next step in the process. They've already committed. You don't need to do anything more there. Go on to the next step. And I think it's really, really critical that that everyone understand that. And it's okay. It's okay. Once a customer says yes, that's what you want, it's time to move on to the next step.
Thanks, Tom. Brian?
That's brilliant. I love that story.
What was your mistake? Yeah.
My mistake? Oh, I've made many mistakes. I love what Tom said. That's good advice in life in general. Just stop talking. Exactly. Have what you want.
Right.
I see some consistent behaviors where people get off track, and I'll talk about those different types of behaviors. One of the behaviors that I see consistently where people get off track is they don't do their follow-ups the way they say they're going to do it. I'm going through this right now with a vendor because people come to us and want us to buy things, sales tools. And so I have one vendor who he's working very, very hard. He's got a good product. He's got a tough sale with us. And I've had 2 or 3 meetings with him. And I'm not the only person he needs to convince. I've had 2 or 3 meetings with him where I've completely laid out for him what he needs to do, what his presentation needs to be. And he takes his notes, but then I don't see the presentation. I mean, if he would just follow, I'm trying to be his champion. I'm trying to help him, but he's not giving me what I need to champion him and his organization. And it's making me think that his product can't do what they're saying it can do, because I'm just not seeing the data. So I tell you that because make sure everything is about trust, right? Everything boils down to trust, because
absolutely.
You look at that champion example I gave, or you look at Tom's example of the blown demo, right? They were ready to buy it from Tom without the demo. They had that trust. His group had built that trust. So you really want to think about that. You really want to think about the long-term implications. People leave companies and they go to other companies and they become your customers there potentially. One bad experience can ricochet around a company much quicker than a good experience. Many good experiences are required to overcome that. So I've seen trust go wrong. Something that screams out to me too is a lot of salespeople constantly want to know how they can climb the organizational org chart and who they should be calling, who's over this person, who's over that person. Look, that's great. That's basic sales 101. Sell high. You want to work with the decision maker.
Exactly.
I would also caution that you have to be very thoughtful once you get to a certain level, because nobody wants to feel like someone's going over their head. And I have seen salespeople blow it up where they were working with the right people. The sale just wasn't going fast enough. And they felt that if they lobbed a call into that person's boss, or they circuitously found out who that person's management team was, and they went to that management team, I get it. Salespeople, aggressive, drive, hear no a lot, don't accept no, keep going. I get all of that. But if you're going to do that, think about how you're going to clear that behavior with the people you're already working with at the company, right?
Mm-hmm.
Think about a reason. So for example, if you want to do that, say something to the effect of, hey, my CEO is very interested in prioritizing your organization as a high profile customer we're working with. And our CEO would like to meet with some of your most senior executive staff. I realize you're a senior person there. I realize that you have a lot of sway in the organization, but you know how CEOs are. They also want to, they want to meet with their counterparts at their level, or close to it. What could we do to help position a meeting between our executive leadership team and some more leaders in your organization, right? I just made that up on the fly, but you think about the way you're going to approach people.
Yeah.
Because they have trust and they have relationships in their own organization. And they don't want their boss or their boss's boss coming to them to like, what the heck are you doing? Like, who is this guy calling me? Or why are they calling me? So it all goes down to trust. It all goes down to preparation, like Tom said in the beginning. But those are some things where I see sales cycles get off track because of over aggressive behavior.
Okay, great. Thanks, Brian. You actually touched upon something very important. I actually want to go a little more deeper in the sales process because, I'm really not convinced that you need to follow every step one by one sequentially before you go and get that order, right? What if I know the CFO of this organization and he's the decision maker, okay? What happens? I just cut across all your initial sales process, just go to him, he's a friend of mine, and kind of sell the solutions and pick up the deal.
I'll grab that one, Tom, if you want.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead, Brian. That'd be great.
Yeah. So there's a great book. It's not an easy read, but I highly recommend it. It's called The Innovator's Dilemma. If you haven't read that book, it's great. And one of the things that book spends a lot of time on is the fact that in companies, especially larger companies, mid-management is making so many of the daily decisions about how a company runs and what a company will actually do, that executive management doesn't even bubble up to executive management. So hold that in your mind, hold that truism in your mind. If you go to in your example, Venki, the CFO, who's your old college buddy, and he's going to do anything for you, and you get him to buy what you're selling, how do you think all those people under him who report to him, who haven't been able to see your product, who maybe had other needs that your product doesn't satisfy, who had other products they were testing, who had other ideas for the budget, do you think that they're going to accept your product and make it a success in the organization? Or do you think that they're going to say, there goes our boss again, telling us what to do. Yeah, we'll get to that product when we get to it. Maybe we won't get to it. Maybe we'll get to it and it won't work exactly right. So sales is selling technology, especially the way we do, is an effort to sell high and sell low and bring it together, right?
Okay, lovely.
And the last point I'll put on that is I find myself as a salesperson and a sales leader, and the people who work for me tell me this all the time. We are actually bringing organizations together. We are helping organizations understand themselves even better, because we're taking information from meeting to meeting to meeting, and we're sharing it across the organization and creating an interlock that almost didn't exist before.
Fantastic. So basically what you're saying is kind of don't tease off people along the way, because you need to deal with them on operational issues, right? So you kind of sell high as well as sell bottom, and you kind of meet somewhere in the middle, right? So yeah, Tom, you want to say something on that too?
Well, yeah, what's an interesting outcome of that is that you may not know that you're doing this, but you really are. You're creating linkages and conversations within that internal organization that might not be happening to begin with. but would be necessary for the deal to close. So it's important. It's funny how, working, you have to work both sides. You need the champions at the bottom that are going to be supportive, and the decision maker, because the decision maker at the end of the day, the guy who's going to sign the contract, his role may be, that's his function on the chart of authority, right? And the people that are really going to use the product, that are going to implement it, that are going to be the champions for it and drive the business forward, are the staff that are underneath it. And so it's really important that, as Brian had said, that you're selling from both directions. You need to support at the top, of course, ultimately, because they're the guys that got to separate the cash from the company, officially. But you need all the folks underneath it to be champions, so that everyone's, in agreement that this is something they should implement.
Okay, great, wonderful. So now that we've understood, at least a step in the right direction in terms of winning the order, I find people, and I've found many of sales execs who actually work for me, they're very hesitant to ask for an order. So when do you think one should ask for the order, Tom?
Depends what product you're selling. Sometimes it's at the first meeting, but no, I'm kidding. That was a joke. But it does matter on the product though, because you have to think about what you're selling, but ultimately relying on your sales process, right? Because the order, if you ask for it too early and the necessary steps, the necessary linkages within the company, the champions haven't been built, the proof of concepts haven't been done, you're not going to get it. So you need to think about the process you're following. And when the steps have been completed, where the company you're selling to has enough decision-making power, or enough information to make a decision, and you've built the trust that you need to get the sale, that's the time to ask for the order. So look at your sales process and knowing that, have I completed all the information that I need to give to the customer, and have they agreed? And have I built the necessary trust with the people that I'm selling to, not only on a personal level, but company to company, that I can rightfully ask for the order and expect to get it.
Great. So Brian, taking a cue from Tom. So when does this actually end? How do you end the sales process?
I feel like if you're doing enterprise type selling for IT type technology, I think when you're saying asking for the order, once you have the compelling event, once you have a champion, this is the big one, once you have that technical win, when you have those three set up, that's what shifts you into the help me understand, Mr. or Mrs. Customer, what are next steps for us to move into procurement? I just asked you for the order. So when you have those three, that's the time to ask for the order. That might be on day one. It might be on day 51. I don't know. Venki, what was your question?
So when does it end? When does the sales process end? Is
Never.
it after the, never?
Yeah, never.
All right.
The sales process never ends, because
if
you're working, if you're working at the right kind of organization, or you're founded the right kind of organization, what's happened is you sold a company something, and now you're developing them as a reference for you. You're developing, you're extending your relationship with them so that they can give you ideas about what your next sale to them can be. Maybe it's a product you're developing, maybe it's a module you're creating that's an add-on, maybe it's a service that they need to take what you sold them and make it even better. But in reality, and by the way, also, I didn't mention, it also never ends, because you want to make sure that they're successful in what they've bought. You don't want people buying things and not using them. So it becomes your job as the account manager to make sure that your customer success team, your support team, your post-sales organization has successfully and is successfully engaging with that customer to make sure that they're happy, or if they're unhappy, those unhappy things are getting addressed, etc. So I'm sorry to tell you this, but it's kind of like a marriage. You are going to be in it for a long time.
Whether they like it or not.
Yeah, because right, whether you like it or not, but because but because we you don't want to be a hit and run salesperson.
Okay.
That will not, you will not have a 25, 30-year career like Tom, where he is able to bring customers with him from organization to organization, have people who have worked for him know that he's a stand-up guy and supports his customers. It's a small world. It feels like a big world, but it's a small world. So I would never think of it in terms of ending. If you make a customer a sale, that's the first sale you've made that customer. Now let's get started on the next sale.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Fantastic.
Exactly.
So, I think, a lot of the audience out here are from startups. And I know both of you have been veterans in actually peddling, MNC products like RSA, Apple, Palo Alto Networks maybe, and stuff like that. So, Tom, you now have transitioned yourself into leading a startup, right? So how different is that? Because as a representative of an MNC or a large corporation, 50% of my job is done in kind of the brand. The brand is already built, right? Mm-hmm. So I think one of the things that startups really find it very difficult is because they do not have a brand at this time.
Yeah.
How do you actually go about selling, right? How do you even get that first call with the decision maker? You know who it is, but you're just not able to get it. So so what do you do? How do you sell? How do you sell?
Yeah, right. So there's a lot of that's a great question, right? And to say every environment's different is not an understatement, but certainly as a startup and you're trying to get out there, I mean, you have a couple of things. You have one, is your product ready to go? You feel confident that you've done the engineering work and that it's solving a real problem that customers in general have, right? Is that done? And then really the next step is about credibility. Right? How do I build credibility in my company when I have very, very little history? And listen, this is where sales can be very personal, where you're calling in people I mean, you need contacts, other people that know other people. Where can you get warm leads where people will be willing to listen to you because they either like what you're doing or respect the technology, and you have that chance to crack open the door. And then from there, it's about, building trust with them, building confidence in your company and selling your product. But it's definitely important to call out those personal networks. The other thing too, that we need to realize today, and I can't believe I'm going to say this, but there is a step that I believe that's changed in the sales process, and that a lot of our customer journeys today begin digitally. I mean, people are searching for solutions on the web. We all do it. I mean, I'm looking for a new desk. I'm not going to a store. The first thing I'm doing is I'm looking for some information digitally. And we have to be prepared that we show up in SEO. So you need to think about these sort of tactical things. One, do I have a digital presence someplace that talks about my company and myself? Am I feeding that the right way with SEO and making sure that I've got the right words and linkages and all that stuff happening? Because customers that are out there today looking for a solution, and let's say, pipeline security, they're Googling pipeline security. And if you show up, that's the first step in your process to go. So digital connection, personal connections are really, I think, important in sort of getting the first step out of the gate.
Mm-hmm.
And Brian, I'm sure you've got some thoughts on that as well. That's
yeah. Look, you got to identify the fact that what you're asking is a hard thing. So you got to go into this situation saying, hey, I know this is a hard thing. There's a great book about this called The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz, who's the co-founder of Andreessen Horowitz, right? And his whole book is the answer to your question, Venki, which is nobody knows who we are and I got to convince them to take my call. And I think Tom hit on it. The reason why you have advisors, the reason why you have investors is
There
to
you go.
leverage them.
There you
You
go.
know, you need to leverage that network. You need to have them walk you in to discussions with companies who will at least entertain the idea of POCing, doing a proof of concept, proof of value of what it is you sell, so that you can start to learn about what your customer base is interested in. But that's what your advisor community is for. And that's what your investment community is for if you're just getting started. And then you have to leverage your network beyond that in unique and interesting ways to help open doors for you. Because if you're just picking up the phone, if you're just cold calling or cold emailing, you're based on what we sell and what we do, you're not going to make much progress. You need introductions. You need to warm it up in order to get that door to open.
Fantastic. Hey, thanks a lot. I think that would be very, very helpful for the founders and the sales enthusiasts who work for smaller companies and startup companies, right? So there's a question from the audience, right? So the question is, being a startup, right? When is the right time to hire a sales executive? Do you need to hire a sales executive after the founder has made some successful, deals, or do we need to kind of get them early in the day? Tom?
It needs to happen sooner than you think it does. Once in my mind, as the product is getting ready to be sort of demoable and sort of sellable, right? That's when you need to bring on sales, because what happens is that, as we talked about the process, there's so many steps in the process that as a founder, you've got other things to do, like QA, and while you're doing QA, you can't be figuring out, who the champion is going to be in the account and what do they need to bring your message forward, or what do I do about SEO, or what do I do about calling advisors and getting warm leads. All these other sort of sales things are easy to get pushed down, and they absolutely become vital because they build on each other and start building a momentum. So I think that a big mistake that a lot of startups make is they figure, okay, well, sales is easy, so I can do that later. And the reality is that the founders or the lead sort of people in an organization don't have the time, because they're working on just getting the product and the company spun up, and they simply don't have the time to deal with all the nuances of being getting your first order.
Okay, great. So Brian, there's a question for you. How do you actually find the internal champion being a startup, right? How do you find the internal champion, and how do we identify this person?
There's no one short route. There's no one answer to this question. If you are doing the things we're talking about, leveraging your network, getting some introductions, preparing the way we talked about at the very beginning of this conversation, understanding the company, understanding how you can help, having open-ended questions, open-ended discussions, doing your follow-ups, you've earned the right to ask the people that you're talking to at the company, who is the decision maker, who are the most interested parties in this in this area that you're working on, right? And it may not be one person. It may be a couple,
Okay.
a
That's
few
interesting.
more. It may be a group of people. Depends on the size of the company. Everything comes back to what you're ultimately trying to do is build trust with the people you work with by being credible, being reliable, being intimately familiar with what's important to them, and then focusing on those things from a mutual success approach, right? You obviously want to be successful. You want your customer to be successful too. That will come across in things like your detailed follow-ups. That will come across in you doing what you say you're going to do. That will come across in the knowledge and the input that you bring to the conversation. You're doing those things. You've asked for the right for help. I mean, you've earned the right to ask for help. You've earned the right to ask for the order, right? So this is why it's called a sales process. And this is also why it's called selling, not buying. If it was buying, this would be easy. You would just show people stuff and they'd buy it. It's called selling, where you need to intellectually convince people that what you bring to the table, your organization brings to the table, is worth their time and money and their political capital and their personal investment. And so that's why you're building that relationship.
Yeah, Brian, I think you read the next question from one of the founders. The question is very interesting. He says, how to build a company where customers come to you rather than we trying to push.
Hold on. Jeff Bezos is calling me. I gotta go because I'm getting on my plane. I mean, guys,
It's fantastic, guys. Yeah. Any thoughts?
Tom, that's a question for you. Enlighten us. How do you do that?
Well, it starts with having the vision, honestly. But building a company where customers come to you is incredibly hard work. But I think it begins with trust and making sure that when the world is out there, they want to deal with companies that they can trust, that they can deliver, and it needs to start with that fundamental practice. But there is no one path to getting customers to call you. But the more you can build trust with customers, the more you can build successes, the more you can get people who are in the industry that you're selling to talking amongst themselves. If you're selling to the agricultural business, right? Farmers talk to other farmers, right? And they talk about what's working for them. And those are really some effective ways to do that. But there are lots of avenues, and I wish I had a direct answer for you on that. But I think at the end of the day, it revolves around trust of the product and that it's solving real world problems.
Great. Looks like, Tom, I think you guys, I think there's some telepathy going on here, because the next question is on trust. The question to you is, Tom, can you define trust in the context of IT services, as more than 80% of the projects fail to deliver? Is trust really mean relationship with decision makers?
Trust, in my mind, there are always things that don't work out, right? Does a product work exactly right, or their features or whatever? But the most important thing in trust that I believe is, you are, it's not rocket science, you are honest with the customer. You've done your research. If you don't know something, tell the customer you don't know it. There's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I don't know how many jelly beans are in this jar. I mean, my best guess is this, but I don't know. So building trust, though, is something that also takes some time. And it's about little wins, one thing after another, where you've delivered again, and you've delivered again. And, those two things combined, delivering and always making sure that you're completely honest with the customer. Those are really critical foundational building blocks in building trust.
Fantastic. Tom, great. Thanks a lot that's a great answer. Brian, there's a question for you. How do you sell your products or services to friends and relatives?
That is an interesting question. It has to be my last one because I have a meeting I have to go to now. I don't know that I've ever considered this one before because I don't have any friends or relatives. But when you say, I'm not really sure I understand the question. I wouldn't treat it any differently.
Okay.
Than what we've been talking about. One of the last things you want to do is damage a personal relationship by not treating it with the same level of scrutiny, importance, that you would treat any other relationship. And I'll give you a quick story on this, because I do believe so much of what we do in our business life tracks to what Tom and I have been talking about today, which is process and trust and preparation and mindset. So I have a role open on my team, a very senior role, VP level role. And there's a guy who's been my friend for a long time who is applying for the role. And when he showed up for the interview with me, he didn't bring his resume. He wasn't prepared with any questions about the role. He just thought we were going to just have a chat about stuff like we talk about. And I was really disappointed. I felt like he hadn't taken it seriously. I felt like he had kind of taken it for granted and had a bit of a sense of entitlement on just because we had a friendship. And I think some people would look at that differently, right? I think some people would look at that like, no, this is my buddy, it's fine. But I'm just not like that. It's me who's going to be on the line. It's me who's going to have to answer for this. And I need to know that you're totally up for this. Even if you feel like I already know that, remind me. So I'll leave you all with that. Venki, Tom, Sam, everybody who made this possible. Don't stop now because of me, but thank you so much. I love speaking with you all. I love the emails I'm getting and the LinkedIn emails that I'm getting during this and the question. And I wish you all great selling and good health. And I'll catch up with you.
Thank you so much, Brian. Thank you for your time. Thank you very much. So, Tom, it's just you and me.
All right. Okay. Yeah.
So before we actually go on to the next question, right? I have a set of rapid fire for you. Would you like to take that?
Sure. I'm all for rapid fire.
You're all rapid fire. Fantastic. Okay. Right. So here are the ground rules. All right. You only have 5 seconds to answer. All right.
That's almost impossible for a salesperson.
That's all, right? So, like you keep talking about thinking on your feet, right? Sales guys will think on their feet, right? So you're pretty good at this stuff, right? So question number 1, whatever comes to your mind, shoot it, okay? Define sales in 1 word.
Hard work.
Brilliant.
It's 2 words.
The highest number of sales calls that you made in 1 day.
25.
Brilliant. Are you a hunter or a farmer? What do you like the most?
I'm a farmer. I like to build relationships. I like to plant seeds and watch them develop and blossom and reap the harvest.
Fantastic. The longest sales cycle that you have taken to open an account in your career?
2.5 years.
Wow. And what did your boss say? Was he okay with it? I mean, kidding, okay?
What is this gonna? Well, if you have the process laid out, again, if you have the process laid out, you can justify these things because the process is here. This is where we are. Yeah.
I'm just kidding. Okay. Here's another one. Did you win the customer after you had a fight with him or her?
Yes.
Brilliant. That speaks of you, Tom. Is dress code important for sales?
Yes, it is. You want to look your part.
Fantastic. Is it more important to be personable or productive as a sales guy?
You need to be both, a little bit of both, but I would say personable. I'm going to go personable.
Great, wonderful. Was sales an accident for you?
Yes, it was. Yes.
Great. This is a common one, but I think you know the answer. Is selling an art or a science?
An art, there's no doubt about it. A work of fine art.
Fantastic. Can everyone who's listening to you today, can they be good at sales? Can they be a good salesperson?
Yes, because everyone can be trusted, and that's the most important piece.
Fantastic.
Everyone can build trust.
Fantastic. Would you, as Tom, give away additional discounts if the customer is your best friend?
No.
Fantastic. What is that one thing that you hate in sales?
I'm sorry, what is the one? I'm sorry, can you
What
repeat
is that one thing that you hate in sales?
Not getting a call back.
Brilliant.
Not getting a call back.
This is an interesting one for you. The next one. Do you, as Tom, act dumb on a sales call?
No. No.
Fantastic. Another one for you. Would you sandbag to achieve quota?
No, you don't want to do that. You want an accurate forecast. You get listen, you get rewarded more for having an accurate forecast than
Fantastic.
sandbagging a forecast.
Fantastic. And there's a last one. Okay. Do you like quota?
Yes, because
There
it
you
gives
go.
you a measurement. It gives
There
you a
you go.
measurement and a goal.
There you go. All sales guys love quota, which is why they love selling, right? Thank you so much, Tom. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I thank you very much. I know there are a lot of questions, but I don't think we'll be able to take that because we are like 10 minutes, into the next meeting. So thank you, everybody who's listening, who's still listening to us, and look forward to many more enterprise sales session with Tom as well, and the IoTForum. And thank you very much for all the leaders in the IoTForum for setting this up. And I would now like to hand this over to Vijeta if he's around and would like to say some few words, closing remarks, or TR Anand, want to say some few words?
Students, Venki. I think every single one of us has been a student. Really loved the rapid fire that you and Tom, you handled with so much of coolness and acumen. Okay, you kind of tackled it so beautifully. We just loved how you were you just really focused on the answers and you gave it your best shot. It was beautifully done. Thank you very, very much. We look forward to this. And Tom, if there's something that we can do for you, you must let us know. You have got a huge fan club, I think.